You know, whenever I see discussions about Fear and Hunger, there is always someone that says the game is bad, bugged, unbalanced, and unplayable. Well, you are right about two of those things. It is definitely bugged, it's full of bugs from top to bottom, and most importantly, it's heavily unbalanced. But not in the way you would think. The game is full of broken stuff and skills available relatively early if you know what to do, which are able to make your run a piece of cake. This is one of the most fascinating parts of the game, but with it, another problem arises: strategic dominance. In game theory, this means that one strategy is better than another strategy for one player, independently from what the opponent will do. In other words, some things end up being useless because of the existence of other, easily obtainable and more powerful ones. And this is the case for what we're gonna talk about today. Let me know other failed mechanics or ideas you would like to hear me rant on, but without further ado, let's destroy blindness in Fear and Hunger! First of all, we have to start by clarifying one very important thing. We will differentiate the blindness applied by opponents and the blindness applied by players. Let's briefly talk about the one applied by opponents. If a character is blinded, they have minus 75% accuracy. And if the main character is blinded, on top of that, the screen will become much darker, preventing you from being able to see almost anything. This state offers some terrifying downsides. That's why, if you want to put something like this in a game, you have to carefully think about who is gonna be able to apply it to the player. In here, blindness is applied by one single opponent in the whole game, the Crow Mauler. He in fact has a 33% chance at the end of each turn to cast a Flock of Crows, and the Flock of Crows has a 40% chance to blind the character target. I don't really have any problems with this blindness. It is devastating if you aren't prepared, but it is applied by a single opponent in the whole game, and has a very low chance. Needless to say, the opponent in question is also very slow, so you can just, you know, not fight him. And cherry on top, there are multiple ways to handle this state. Skeletons are immune, so if you want you can use them as a tank. Or, to counter the state, you can also equip the Iron Mask, which prevents blindness. Oh, wait. It doesn't only prevent blindness, it also heals blindness. Yeah, if you are blinded and keep the Iron Mask, you are gonna heal it. Let's continue. The accuracy drop also doesn't affect stuff like Black Orb or Hurting, which are magical attacks, and magical attacks do not check your accuracy. So blinded characters still have a chance to use some stuff without the Iron Mask. This, in my opinion, is a good way to implement blindness from an opponent. But Frapollo, the video is called Failed Mechanics! So far you have been praising the game again! Hold on, relax. Because now, the worst part comes. You see, there are some ways which allow you to apply blindness to the opponent, and it's the worst thing you could do by far. Here, once again, blindness reduces the accuracy of the opponent by 75%, but here it's where the problems start. If you ever played Fear and Hunger, you will know opponents are composed of different body parts, each one with their own accuracy, their own protection, their own HP, etc. What you have to do is to blind the head of the opponent. After you do this, at the end of the turn, this does something under the scenes. In this exact moment, all the opponent's body parts will get a special invisible state. It's called Blindness 2, and like the other blindness, it too reduces accuracy by 75%. There are a couple of exceptions to this head thing I just said. For example, on Cave Mother you have to blind the torso because you cannot select the head. But if from what I told you this doesn't seem that bad, let me re-elaborate a little bit, okay? You have to wait the end of the turn, so already giving the opponent a chance to attack potentially, just to then reduce their accuracy for the next turns by 75%, so still having a chance for them to attack you. The first turn in any battle of Fear and Hunger is determining. It allows you to immediately get rid of the most problematic parts of normal enemies. In boss battles you can set up your strategy with elements like, I don't know, pheromones or a brown vial. Especially early on, if you mess up something on the first turn, you may get heavily punished. This is what makes stuff like Enguard a very good skill against enemies where it works. But let's stop talking about actually good skills. Let's go back to blindness. Think about it, the strategy you enable with blindness blindness is wait a turn. You have to wait a whole turn where the opponent can potentially strangle you before being able to even start getting value from this plan. But okay, I'm sure between you there is someone that goes like, hey, it may not be the best strategy, but as you mentioned, stuff like Enguard exists. You can enter the battle having a free turn at the start where you can blind the opponent. That seems good, am I right? Yeah, maybe if you have Enguard it's usable, right? No. Remember that all the limbs that are not the head will still have 25% accuracy, so they are still able to occasionally land attacks on you. But what I just said only applies to opponents which are able to attack with body parts that are not the head, which is every single enemy in the game. Every single one of them has at least one body part which is not the head which attacks, and only a couple of those also use the head for attacking. We will see the most important case later, but even there, this plan still fails 1 out of 4 times for each enemy part that attacks. Wasn't it better to, you know, I'm gonna give you a 10,000 IQ idea, are you ready? Attack the body part that attacks you and kill it before it can deal damage to you! But to be fair, if you have Enguard and an opponent has several attacking body parts and you don't have a more consistent plan to apply to kill those parts, maybe it can be used. Like, look at the body snatcher. 3 attacking arms. Maybe if you're alone, Enguarding and blinding is useful, am I right? No. Somehow, here it's where it gets worse. It gets even worse. Up to now, I told you blindness reduces accuracy. That's the problem. Let me explain. The game engine used by Fear and Hunger, RPG Maker MV, has 3 types of attacks. Physical attacks, magical attacks, and certain hits. Magical attacks are irrelevant in this discussion, let's just focus on physical attacks and certain hits. The difference we care about between the two is very simple. Certain hits do not care about the accuracy. Yeah, you heard me right. All the stuff we talked about achievable with blindness is thrown out of the window with those attacks, and almost all the enemies of the game possess at least one skill which is a certain hit, and some other opponents have only certain hits. Let's resume the phrase I said before. If you have Enguard and an opponent has several attacking body parts, and you don't have a more consistent plan to apply, and at least one of those parts have physical attacks, maybe it can be used, right? Like, look at the Elite Guard. Both the attacks of the arms are physical attacks. It may not be sexy, but maybe here it's usable, right? And this is where we go to the part where it gets even... Sorry if I'm laughing, but I really find this funny that it gets even worse than this. Tell me one thing. How do you apply blindness again? Sit down and be prepared, because it is time to list all the possible ways to apply blindness present in the game. There is a grand total of 2 ways to apply blindness! Oh, world ending, wow! There is a grand total of 2 ways to apply this already incredibly situational mistake. But wait, Frapollo, if you think about it, poison has only 3 ways of being applied, and that's one of the best things in the game. Because, you know, poison does something to progress into the battle, unlike this other piece of garbage. But anyways, you know what? Okay, I will follow you. Let's agree that quality over quantity is better. Let's analyze these 2 ways to apply blindness. Number 1, Red Vial. It is a random item that you can occasionally find. Now, don't misunderstand me, there are a lot of very good random items, but hoping for a random item just to be able to get blindness on the opponent, it's abysmally stupid. Also because Red Vial can be used to destroy some iron doors if you don't already have enough damage. But hey, if the first method is so terrible, maybe the second one is better, right? And yeah, it is better. But... Number 2, Flock of Crows. Flock of Crows, it's a skill, so it can be used as long as you have mind. That's right, it is a skill which is part of the God of the Depths skill tree in the Hexen. And currently in the game, to get it you need to either play as Enki and start with max affinity with the God of the Depths, or use an empty scroll. You have to waste a valuable empty scroll just to enable this strategy. Now, to clarify, Flock of Crows, it's very good, but not for the reason you may think. Flock of Crows attacks 3 times the same body part and inflicts blindness. I think if you have at least one brain cell, you can realize the part which makes this skill usable. 3 attacks on a head will cause almost surely one of them to instantly get rid of it. It is basically Black Orb, but infinitely more difficult to be obtained. What am I trying to say is, if you ever happen to use this skill in a battle, you are not doing it for the blindness, you are definitely doing it for the Black Orb. Unless you are in a very specific battle. Allow me to repeat the phrase with this new info. If you have Guard, an opponent has several attacking body parts, you don't have a more consistent plan to apply, at least one of those parts have physical attacks, and you either found a random red vial or possess for some ungodly reason Flock of Crows, maybe it can be used? Yes. If all these conditions are applied at the same time, then yes. In that case, you can take advantage of this strategy. And now, tell me, you stupid madman, was it ever worth it? Or was it better to just use another strategy, which is much more easily achievable? Now, let's give Caesar what actually belongs to Caesar. There is another way to use Red Vial and Flock of Crows, which works on very few enemies. You see, up to this point, I never told you what do they actually do. Red Vial and the Flock of Crows not only apply Blindness, they also apply Blindness 2 at the same time. As you may imagine, all the body parts that are not heads are immune to Blindness. But for the way in which RPG Maker works, in order to make it so that opponents' body parts get the state Blindness 2 at the end of the turn when you blind the head, they must not be immune to Blindness 2. In other words, if you really wanted, you could use Red Vial or Flock of Crows to instantly inflict Blindness 2 to a single body part of the opponent, which means reducing the accuracy of that body part and that body part alone by 75%. Again, it's terrible, it only works on a small number of enemies because the majority is still immune to Blindness 2, it still gives the part a 25% chance to be able to attack you, but I just wanted to mention it because it's funny. But the real one useful thing you can do with Blindness is fighting the Crow Mauler. Yes, the one opponent which applies Blindness on you is also the one opponent where Blindness is very useful. If you're wondering why I waited up to this point to mention it, is because I can't wait for people in the comments ready to write "Lomao! He doesn't even know you can blind the Crow Mauler, what an idiot!" without having watched the video. The head of the Crow Mauler does Peck, which is an insta-kill, but it's also a physical attack, so if you blind the head of the Crow Mauler, Peck will never hit. Anyways, Blindness having this one use does not justify whatsoever his incompetence in literally all the other situations. Having a use in one single battle, regardless of how important that battle is, does not justify anything. Enemies with original skills that are only useful for their one battle create variety, create unique situations. Enemies feel special. But skills or items usable by the player which are only useful in a single battle become boring. Imagine if this was more extreme, okay? You are full of skills which are only used once when they get introduced against the respective opponent, and after that they just park rent-free in your skill menu. Are those really skills at all? Or are they just glorified gimmicks? Why not just creating a special interaction for the one time you use them in that case? But I guess I spent enough time ranting. And you? What do you think? Is Blindness a failed mechanic in your opinion? Let me know in the comments, and maybe even about the other terrible mechanics I may talk about next. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, but for today that's it. I was Frapolo94, and I will see you next time.